Welcome to the Holocaust Center for Humanities Lunch and Learn program. I'm Alana Cohn-Kennedy, the CEO of the Holocaust Center. As people are logging in, please take a moment to let us know from where you are joining in the chat. Last week, students from Bishop Blanchette High School in Seattle participated in our new program called Holding History, which brings the Holocaust Center's museum to the classroom. Our expert museum educators bring artifacts from the museum and lead the students in an exploration of the artifacts. They discuss Jewish identity and anti-Semitism and the different ways each person can engage in upstander actions to fight hatred. After the visit, one student wrote, "This activity put everything into perspective. It shows how quickly discrimination can unfold into something greater. The phrase change begins with me shows me that there is something I can do personally, which gives me hope for the next generations." In just a few short months since we launched the program Holding History, hundreds of students have already taken part in it, and hundreds more will participate this spring. This is just one of the many ways the Holocaust Center's museum serves the community. Our museum is dynamic. It's both inside and outside of the walls of our building. The Holocaust Center is a trusted place for everyone, students, adults, and everyone in between, for people of all backgrounds and religions. Inside the walls of our museum, we will be showcasing the outstanding exhibit, Let Me Be Myself, the life story of Anne Frank. The exhibit will be opening on Thursday, April 3rd through the end of May. We have expanded our hours for this exhibit and will be open every Thursday from 4 to 7 p.m. and every Sunday from 10 to 4. Walk-ins are welcome, but we encourage you to get your tickets in advance on our website. We have lots of great programming in conjunction with the exhibit, including our Holocaust Remembrance Day program, which will feature Holocaust survivors from the Netherlands, including one survivor who knew Anne and Margot Frank. The program is April 24th at the Seattle Public Library, downtown Seattle. We are living in a time when news and information is more readily accessible to us than ever before. Deciphering what is true and accurate is no longer clear-cut. Even when proven false, conspiracy theories seem to keep sticking. And here with us today is Dr. Joseph Uscinski, an expert on this subject. Dr. Uscinski is a professor of political science at the University of Miami. He studies conspiracy theories and the people who believe them. He is the author of several books, including American Conspiracy Theories and Conspiracy Theories and the People Who Believe Them. He has been featured in countless articles and programs, including those in the Rolling Stone, Los Angeles Times, The Atlantic, Newsweek, The Guardian, The New York Post, Fox, and so many more. We will take questions at the end of the program, but please feel free to type in your questions at any time into the Q&A feature on Zoom. Welcome, Joe, and thank you so much for joining us today from Miami. I'll turn the program over to you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you everyone for coming to hear what I have to say. I've been studying this topic for, I think, more than 15 years now, and I used to make a joke where I would say the downfall of the Republic is generally a boon for my career, but now I actually think it might be the downfall of the Republic, so it's not as much of a joke anymore. Because of recent events going on. So let me share my screen and we'll get going. So I'm going to open up with some of my latest data on anti-Semitism and conspiracy theories. I'll talk very quickly about some of my more complicated analyses involving Holocaust denial and violence, and then I'll give you the big contours of conspiracy theories in the U.S. So these are a few items I ran a few months back, So anti-Semitism is alive and well in the US, as are anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So anything involving George Soros, we're getting at least 20% usually. Are Jewish people more loyal to Israel than the US? 16%. Jewish people look down on non-Jews, 14%. Jewish people engage in secret agreements with each other, 12. Jews seek to exploit non-Jews, 9%. Jewish people have exaggerated their suffering in the Holocaust to profit from it, 8%. So these ideas are still believed, certainly not as much as they might have been 100 years ago, and certainly not as much as they might be in some places in the Middle East, but it's alive and well in the US. I think the bad news is, and I promise this will be the most complicated thing I show you um, today in my slides. I poll on a lot of conspiracy theories, and I've been polling on them for more than 15 years. And this is 50 that I've polled on recently, asking people, do you believe this or not? And we also ask people if they want to commit or support the use of political violence to achieve political ends. Consistently across all my surveys, if you doubt the Holocaust, you typically have the rosiest view of political violence. And we tend to find that not only is it people who believe the Holocaust support political violence, but they often claim to have committed it recently. And they also claim to have engaged in conflictual interpersonal behaviors. So generally what we find, and this is sort of the colloquial way of saying it, is that bad people engage in bad behaviors and they also adopt bad beliefs. So the good news here is that, not that many people, usually between 15 and 20% think the Holocaust, the number of deaths in the Holocaust was exaggerated. So that's good. That's not that highly believed, but the bad news is the people who believe it tend to be the worst sorts of people. So that's the complicated stuff. Here's the more general thing. So we keep hearing all the time that we live in a post-truth world where we don't know, people don't know what the truth is anymore, and it's easy to believe in conspiracy theories because we're being overwhelmed by them. And certainly we do hear a lot about conspiracy theories lately. When I got into this topic 15 years ago, there was a co-author who asked me if I wanted to do this work with him, and I said no. And the reason I gave was because no one cares about this. I said, sure, there's conspiracy theories, but it's not a big topic that scholars are writing about or journalists are writing about. And I was right at the time. But that changed around 2015 when Trump got into the race. And certainly, just to put some numbers on it, I think when my book came out in 2014, I might have taken 20 or 30 phone calls from journalists on my book coming out. In 2015, I think that doubled to 100. And by 2020, I was taking 300 calls from journalists a year just to talk about conspiracy theories. The same thing with coverage, and this is just the New York Times. When I got into the topic in 2010, there was maybe a little more than 100 articles written by the New York Times that year that had the word conspiracy theory in it. By 2023, it was 800 plus that had conspiracy theory in it. And I'm pretty sure this year or last year probably surpassed that. I think the latest numbers put us over 1,000 for 2024. And this year is projected to be even more than that. So we're talking about it quite a bit as a society. So in all that coverage of conspiracy theories, what is the narrative that we're talking about? It's usually something like this: trust is waning, conspiracy theories are on the rise. From the Congo to the Capitol, says The Economist, conspiracy theories are surging. And Politico tells us we're living in the golden age of conspiracy theories. So in this narrative, who's to blame? It's usually the internet is loosening our grip on truth. The pandemic video is going across social media. Social medias are boosting election fraud claims. YouTube has unleashed the conspiracy theory boom. And TikTok is doing it too. They're spreading political conspiracy theories. Um, and when I said, who's the villain that we're blaming in this narrative, I actually meant it. It's an actual villain. It's Zuckerberg, and these other people are modern Bond villains, according to The Guardian. And they're also coming for our children while they spread their conspiracy theories. Who's most susceptible to all this stuff? Usually it's Republicans. Um, they seem to be believing in the wackiest things, according to the mainstream news. And what are the dangers of all this? Well, even if no one believes it, it's dangerous. The weather people from our local stations are being attacked. COVID people aren't going to get vaccinated because of all the conspiracy theories, and they're sparking violence. So that's all bad. And we could see, specific examples of this in the coverage where people are kidnapping their own kids, killing their kids, and killing their spouses over conspiracy theories. So that's the narrative that we're getting. And even from the White House, well, I guess Biden was saying that social media is killing people with conspiracy theories and misinformation. Trump's not complaining about it. He's probably more of a culprit. The public agrees with this narrative. 70% of Americans currently think conspiracy theories are out of control. Most Americans think that we believe more conspiracy theories than we did 25 years prior. And most Americans blame social media for this state of affairs. So if we were to just make a quick model of all this coverage, it usually looks something like this. Social media use is leading to increases in conspiracy theory beliefs. And those increased beliefs are then leading people to act in non-normative ways. And by non-normative, I mean they're committing violence, they're fighting each other, they're doing sort of non-normal things. There's something unique about conservatives that make them particularly prone to all of these things. And if we were to remove some of this online contact, it would short circuit what's going on in this model. So that's essentially the narrative that we're getting from the media. Now, if we wanted to simplify this a little bit more, we just say there's a bunch of nice, happy people out there. They go online, and then, they get pulled into right-wing circles, and then they become QAnon believers, and they take their frustrations out on the world and go out committing various forms of violence. So that's what we're getting in a nutshell. The question I want to ask as a social scientist is this narrative true? If it's true, what should we do about it? And if it's not true, what's the better model that would explain our world right now? So let me preface this by going back about 100 years. So a young Orson Welles in the 1930s goes and does a program that airs on the East Coast called War of the Worlds. This is sort of like a original version of fake news where they pretend that New Jersey has been invaded by aliens, and they report it as if it's actually going on at the time. Now, supposedly, upon hearing this radio program, people freak out because they're tricked into thinking aliens have invaded New Jersey. And then you get headlines like this: fake radio program scares nation, panic sweeps across the U.S. Radio listeners in a panic, and they take it as fact. And even when I was in high school in the 80s, this was taught as everyone escaped New Jersey because they thought the alien invasion was real. The next day, Orson Welles is sent out to give his pound of flesh to the media to apologize. The only problem was that there were numerous disclaimers during the program. Not many people listened to it. It's not clear that anyone acted on it and ran out of New Jersey. And there's no evidence at all of a mass panic. So why the disjuncture between what actually happened and what the newspapers reported the next day? Well, we always have this assumption that people are massively persuaded by media messages, but that's not really the case. right? We've known for a long, long time through hundreds of studies that, yeah, media has an effect, but it just doesn't persuade people in very strong ways. Most people are just not persuadable on things that they're not already believing in which case they're not really being persuaded. Flashy headlines sell, so newspapers ran with Panic Sweeps Nation rather than there was a news program that was goofy and no one paid attention. That's not going to sell papers. And at the time, radio was a competitor to newspapers, and newspapers wanted the government to start regulating radio more um, to injure them. So this sort of sets up where I'll probably be going for the next 35 minutes. So ironically, then the newspapers were spreading fake news about the fake news program on radio, and they were lying in a sense to make themselves look more truthy than their radio competitors. But luckily, we don't do that anymore. We don't try to extract our pound of flesh from people. So let's see if this is true. This narrative is true, given what I just said, that it might not be. And we'll start here with increases in conspiracy theory beliefs. Have these increased? Because if the answer is no, then the impact of social media probably isn't all that strong. And then we'll move on to all of these other parts. So, have beliefs increased in recent years? I'll start with three critical cases: COVID, QAnon, and JFK. So starting with JFK, which is the conspiracy theory that we have the longest time series of survey data on. It was only a few weeks after the assassination in 1963 that Gallup ran a poll and asked people, was it a lone gunman or a broader conspiracy? 50% of Americans said broader conspiracy. By the mid 70s, this increased to almost 80% and stayed that way. It only came down in the 90s and in more recent years. And now it's about back to where it started. But you could see, one, you don't need the internet or social media to have a really popular conspiracy theory, because the peak of this happened long before people had computers. And it's not necessarily the case that conspiracy theories are going to become more popular just because the internet and social media are available, which came much later here. When COVID hit, I had a poll about to go into the field, so I put two items on it. One was asking, is COVID being exaggerated to hurt Trump in the election year? And the other one was, is it a bioweapon purposely intended to harm us? And in March of 2020, I got around 30% saying yes to each of those. And then I followed up with polls in June, October, and then for the bioweapon question in May of 2021. And again, they stayed just about flat. There were no increases in these two conspiracy theories, which are sort of omnibus for a lot of the more specific ideas that were going around about COVID. So again, at a period of time where everyone was saying everyone's becoming a conspiracy theorist, and everyone was at home locked down, and everyone was afraid of a deadly virus, and there was economic uncertainty, and people lost their jobs, and everyone spending more time online. Flat, no increases. So either people believed it or they didn't. And this is also during the time where everyone was freaking out about that pandemic video that was shared millions of times, but doesn't seem to have an effect on people believing in conspiracy theories. In June of 2020, we did another poll and we asked people about a whole bunch of other ideas that have supposedly become popular on COVID. We asked if the government was going to force everyone to take a vaccine, if Bill Gates was behind it, if we would get tracking devices in our necks, if hydroxy cures COVID, if 5G spreads it, or if you could spray yourself with Lysol and prevent or cure your COVID. Several of these were things that Trump said himself. But again, no increases between June 2020 and May 2021. Either they stayed flat or they came down over time. So no evidence of mass increases. QAnon's another one that people were talking about, particularly during the COVID lockdowns, saying it's spreading everywhere. And the social media companies, responding to political pressure, decided to remove a lot of QAnon posts. Well, I was polling on this with what we call a feeling thermometer, where we ask our respondents in nationwide polls on a scale of 0 to 100, how much do you like QAnon? With zero meaning I hate it, and 100 meaning I really love it. It was averaging around 20 when we first started polling on it in 2018. And you could see between 2018 and 2020, it was flat around a 24, which is people really don't like it very much because that's 24 out of 100 on average. Yet these are the headlines. It's conspiratorial, dangerous, and growing. We're talking about all wrong as it dips. It's as popular as major religions, dipping. It's not dead, it's growing. It's gone mainstream, and it took over the mainstream. So these are the headlines. There's a big disjuncture between the headlines that are coming out and what the polls are actually showing. It's just not a popular thing that people like. Yet the headlines are just crazed. And if we were just to do a flat up yes or no, do you believe in QAnon, yes or no, we get 5% in 2019 and 5.5%, which is like no change in 2021. And this was all during the time period where people were saying it's growing and growing and growing, not finding it. I polled on 37 other conspiracy theories outside of those three critical cases in 2021. And what I had done was I went back to the survey archives and find every conspiracy theory that had been polled on in decades prior. And I re-polled them the exact same way with national samples to see if they'd gone up or gone down over time. And a handful had increased over time. But most had either stayed the same or decreased. And the decreases were much larger than the increases, and the increased beliefs weren't things that anyone was talking about. So, for example, the belief that Kurt Cobain was killed by a conspiracy has gone up, but it's not like anyone's really talking about that or cares. Putting aside just specific beliefs, we've also polled on, are there particular general groups that people might think are conspiring against us? So we give people a list of groups every few years and say, check all the ones you think are working in secret against the rest of us. In 2012, people checked 2.6 groups. In 2020, it was the same. So no real increase. So again, not finding anything. And then I also have a psychometric scale, which is sort of a bunch of general items we give people, and we use their responses to sort of say, are they generally inclined towards conspiracy theories or not? And you can see the items on the left. And the average response to these items has been really stable over a decade. So again, we're not finding evidence that people are just becoming more conspiracy minded over time. It just hasn't happened as far as we can tell. So is social media doing something then? If beliefs aren't increasing, maybe something else is going on, so let's take a look anyway. So yes, it's absolutely true that in hundreds of studies now, social media use is correlated with conspiracy theory beliefs, such that the more social media people use, the more conspiracy theory beliefs they tend to believe in. But the problem is that correlation isn't causation. And what seems to be going on is that people who believe lots of conspiracy theories tend to use more social media because they're seeking out what they already believe rather than vice versa. And conspiracy theories just aren't what most people see. I mean, certainly you can go and find conspiracy theories if you seek them out, but the question becomes who's seeking them out? And it's usually people who already believe them, who just want to see stuff that makes them feel good. So if we're to just look at website rankings in the US, the biggest conspiracy theory website in the US is typically InfoWars. And just for May 2024, I'll just look at 1 month, they had 6.4 million unique views and they were ranked 3,200 something in terms of web traffic in the US. Compare that to the New York Times, 685 million views, ranked 25 in the US, right? So, people aren't racing to the internet to get their fake news. They tend to go to the internet to get real news. And then if we were to ask a more broad question, what are people going to the internet for? Usually porn and everything else tends to take the cake. Because typically what we find when we study people's internet happens, they're not looking at real news or fake news. They're looking at all sorts of other stuff that's available to them on the internet. So given that, are there increases in non-normative behavior because of conspiracy theory beliefs? Well, maybe, maybe not. What we tend to find is that conspiracy theory beliefs and engaging in non-normative behaviors like violence and interpersonal conflict, yes, they are correlated, but both of those things, the beliefs and the behaviors, seem to be undergirded by antisocial personality traits. So people who tend to be conflictual generally, they tend to be high in narcissism, psychopathy, and other dark psychological traits. It's those sorts of people who tend to both pick up conspiracy theory beliefs, particularly the antisocial ones like Holocaust denial, and they engage in non-normative behaviors like violence and conflict. So it's probably not the beliefs causing the behavior. It's probably the fact that they are a conflictual, antisocial person inclined towards violent behavior that's driving the beliefs and the behaviors. So oftentimes people will act in really bad ways, and the conspiracy theory is often used as a rationalization for the behavior. So when you look at a lot of these big these behaviors that make headlines, like the woman who trashed a Target mask aisle because she was a QAnon believer. Well, as it turns out, when she did this, she was facing financial difficulty because of the pandemic. She was in isolation. I think she might have been off her meds, and she was having some other difficulties, but she had pre-existing psychological conditions. So you put that together, and you're going to get someone who acts out, conspiracy theory or not. The person who killed his kids with the spear gun in California because he thought they had lizard DNA. As it turns out, the person probably won't even stand trial because they're clearly schizophrenic and they had lost touch with reality. In fact, this person thought that he was the Keanu Reeves character from the movie The Matrix. And the guy who killed the Gambino crime boss in New York, he didn't even stand trial. He was a QAnon believer, but he thought that Trump was giving him orders through his car radio. And that's why he was behaving the way he did, but he couldn't stand trial because he's not mentally fit. So again, you have a bunch of things going on with these people that are probably driving both the beliefs and the behaviors at the same time. The most recent example is this guy. He went to a Washington, D.C. pizza shop, shot off a round because he was thinking he was saving children from being eaten by Hillary Clinton in the basement. He did 4 years in jail. When he went in front of the judge, he said, "Your Honor, I'm sorry. I thought I was saving children." The judge said, "Yeah, but your bullet was about 4 inches from somebody's brain." When the guy got out of prison, he got arrested for a few more things. When he got pulled over by the cops, he tried to shoot the cop. The cops killed him first. So again, you don't need the conspiracy theory. As it turns out, the guy was just inclined towards criminal behavior. Is there something unique about conservatives? Well, it seems like it, but no, not really. Having polled on, several dozen conspiracy theories over the years, I could tell you when you accuse the right of doing something, it'll be all Democrats believing it. You accuse the left of doing something, it'll be all people on the right believing it. And a lot of things are equally believed by both sides. So a lot of the whole Holocaust and anti-Semitic stuff is often believed equally by right and left. but a lot of beliefs are held equally by right and left. So it's not the case that conservatives are just naturally inclined towards more conspiracy theories. I think what I might say instead is that now you're probably going to find um, more 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 beliefs on the right, largely because the leaders on the right are transmitting a lot of conspiracy theories like election fraud and whatnot to their audiences. But that's less innate than it is sort of being driven by the choices of strategic politicians. Even if we take something like QAnon, which is always said to be it's a far right conspiracy theory. I mean, we polled on it a few times, and it's not consistently on the right. Oftentimes, it's equal on the right and left, with people believing in QAnon. And part of the reason for that, it's not partisanship that was driving it so much as it was just hating the government more generally, that drove it. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit. So should we rethink this narrative? You know, so my argument's going to be yeah. So um, let me give you some other reasons just to doubt what the media says about conspiracy theory. So um, once we say all their claims about increases don't seem to be backed up, recently at least, um, they make a lot of causal claims about change that just seem to be contradictory. So 9/11 ushered in the new era of conspiracy theories. The Sandy Hook shooting ushered in the new era of conspiracy theories. They flourished after the Parkland shooting. The pandemic gave us the golden age of conspiracy theories. So everything gives us a new age of conspiracy theories. So seemingly every day there's a new age brought about by every big event. Um, but if we look even further back at what the media tells us about conspiracy theories, it's not just the recent headlines. You can go back. It was a highly conspiratorial year, according to Vox in 2018. 2017, it was the year of conspiracy theories, according to the Daily Star. We are a conspiracy nation now in 2013, according to the Times. 2011, they never lodged this deeply in the American psyche, said the New York Daily News. 2010, according to The Guardian, was a period of fashionable conspiracism. 2004 was the golden age of conspiracy theory, according to the Globe. 1994, Washington Post said it's a dawn of a new age of conspiracy theory, but that's a correction because only 3 years prior they said we were then living in the age of conspiracy theory. 1977, we were as conspiracy prone as the Pan-Slav nationalists from the 1880s. I'm not even sure what that means. And 1964, conspiracy theories are growing we like in this country. So, according to journalists, there's always a conspiracy panic going on. But these claims are always made without very much evidence behind them at all, other than someone licking their thumb, putting it to the wind, and saying, yeah, now feels like the time. So let me give you a different model that I think is probably more explanatory of what's going on right now. You have opportunistic elites. So by that, I mean politicians and partisan media people using hot button anti-system conspiracy theories to get people who are already inclined towards those ideas ginned up, pulls them towards their side and gets them excited about something and essentially activates them into political behavior. And then because of that, you wind up with a bunch of people with lousy beliefs and lousy personality traits going out and taking their frustrations out on the world. And it just so happens that in recent years, it's certain conservative Republican elites who are doing this. So let me give you a case study, and that is what I call the new satanic panic. So the last few years, you've had a lot of senators and representatives saying that Disney and Democrats and gay people and trans people are all trying to do satanic things to children where they do sex stuff and maybe kill them and eat them or who knows what. But they're doing something awful to children involving satanic inspired sexual harms. And just to give you some quotes on this, this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, representative from Georgia. The Democrats are the party of pedophiles, of princess predators from Disney, teachers, elementary school teachers trying to transition their school-age children. Their identity is the most disgusting, evil, horrible thing happening in this country. So they've been saying this sort of stuff for the past few years. You've had pastors doing it too. Here's a megachurch from Tennessee. These bunch of sex trafficking pedophiles in Hollywood are about to be exposed. Fraudulent, sleepy Joe Biden. He's a sex trafficking demon-possessed mongrel. No better than the Pope, Oprah Winfrey, and Tom Hanks and the rest of that wicked crowd. God is going to expose Kamala Harris for the Jezebel demon that she is. So that's the rhetoric that people are being exposed to. I don't think it's persuading anyone, but I do think it's sort of activating people who probably have already held these sorts of beliefs for a long, long time. So are satanic cults abusing thousands of children? 1 in 3 Americans say yes. It's the government in Hollywood running a massive sex trafficking racket, 1 in 3. Gay agenda converting young people, 28% say yes. Secret agenda in public schools to indoctrinate children into gay and trans lifestyles, 27%. Disney is grooming children, 1 in 4. Satanic ritual abuse widespread, 1 in 4. Preschools, public schools engaging in satanic practices, 18%. These beliefs tend to go together pretty well. So if you believe one, you tend to believe several. So what predicts these beliefs? If you hate the political establishment writ large, regardless of who's running it, if you think the government should be run by men and not women, if you hate intellectuals like professors, if you frequent fringe online news use, if you're personally paranoid, if you're a Christian nationalist, if you're high in dark personality traits like sadism and psychopathy, if you like blowing things up and have a psychological need for chaos, if you have high levels of male role normativity, such as I don't think men should kiss in public, then you tend to hold these beliefs. So further, people who hold those satanic panic beliefs also don't like immigrants very much. They think immigration policy discriminates against white people, and they want to kick Asians out because of COVID. They tend to like Russia and don't want to support Ukraine. They want to overturn Roe. They vastly overestimate the size of child trafficking in the US. They like extremist groups and like Biden, or don't like Biden, but do like Trump. If violence is called for in our politics, they are ready. They like to lie online. They like to argue with people. And they like to spend a lot of time doing politics on social media. They might want to run for office one day and feel qualified to do so. They like investing in crypto and don't want to get vaccinated. So that's who these people are. And then when you get them activated on these beliefs, and then this is what you get. You get people bombing drag shows, people blowing up donut shops, death threats made to children's hospitals, schools getting bomb threats, because you get a bunch of people with dark traits going out and taking their frustrations out on the world. And just to systematize that, the number of anti-LGBTQ plus protests are here, and you could see that during the time when this rhetoric was getting popular, the number of protests were going up, as were the number of such protests that had the open carry of firearms by protesters. So not just going to protest gay people, but bringing a gun with you. And I'll just do one other quick one while we have one or two more minutes left for me to talk. White replacement conspiracy theories have also been activated in the last few years. We get about a third of people thinking that powerful government officials and corporate officials, often Jewish people, are trying to get rid of whites and replace them with cheaper immigrant labor from other countries. And then you get people buying into this, and they go out and kill people. And both of these sorts of groups of conspiracy theories, the white replacement and the satanic sexual harms to children stuff, sort of overlap, and then you get Nazi groups, um, who believe both, going out and blowing up things. So I will leave it there. I'm going to skip through a couple, and I'll be happy to take any questions you have. But I'll just wrap up with one final line, and that is the good news is that beliefs aren't going up. The bad news is that the people who believe a lot of these things, they feel like now is their time because they have politicians who are playing Pied Piper for them and giving them what they want to hear and making them feel like they should go out and get involved somehow. But unfortunately, a lot of these folks want to be involved in ways that are violent and harmful. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Joe. There was so much information packed into that presentation. We have a number of questions, but I want to start with one that I saw come in also. And I was wondering, can you drill down a little bit into some of the Holocaust conspiracy theories and maybe tell us a little bit more specifically about I, any information you have about those, like who is believing them? What are they saying? How prevalent are they? You touched on it, and it was really interesting to see kind of that they're right in the middle of your large graph. Can you tell us
Mhm.
a little more about it?
Yeah, so people on the right and left believe Holocaust denial and other anti-Semitic stuff about equally. When you find partisan differences, often if it will tend to be something that's George Soros specific, because those generally tend to be pushed by right-wing politicians, so those find their way to right-wing audiences. But if it's just Holocaust denial, then you're going to find that it tends to be split between right and left evenly. I've been polling on one item about Holocaust denial for I don't know, the last 6 or 7 years. We get around 15 to 20% agreeing that the Holocaust has been exaggerated for political purposes. Um, it moves a little bit over time, but not much. And typically, those people that say yes to that are typically ones who also like violence. They're conflictual people. They have high levels of dark personality traits, and they tend to believe lots of other conspiracy theories too. Um, so I often tend to give people, this choice. Let's say I was inviting you to a picnic and you show up to my picnic and I say, oh, I'm going to sit you over here at the picnic table next to Todd. Todd's really into the JFK conspiracy theory. He thinks the CIA did it. Most people say, like, okay, I'll have a chat with Todd. He sounds a little bit whatever, but nothing harmful there. But if you show up at my barbecue and I said, hey, I'm going to sit you next to Larry, he's a Holocaust denier. Most people would probably leave my barbecue right away. And it's not just because the idea itself is offensive. It's because we sort of know that the people that are buying into that aren't the sort of people that we want to hang around with. That they're going to have a lot of personality traits that are going to make them ornery as a barbecue partner. Um, and that's what the data shows. So it's not just a belief that somebody slipped on a banana peel and adopted. It's people with a lot of non-normative traits tend to pick up socially unacceptable ideas.
So another question that came in was wondering, the person was wondering if you know how this might compare to conspiracy theories outside of the United States or in other countries. Like, are we unique in the US with these kinds of statistics, or is this more common globally?
We are exceptional in many, many ways in the US, but this is not one of them.
Hmm.
So on that score, we're kind of middling.
Mhm.
So we're on par with Germany and Italy and the UK and some other countries. Not the highest, not the lowest. If you want to escape from conspiracy theories as much as possible, move to Sweden. Um, if you want to be in sort of a Western country with more conspiracy theories, I think maybe Portugal might be your best bet right now. But we're not the most, even though it sometimes feels like it. But I will give a caveat, and that is it's hard to compare across countries because um, there's different things going on at different countries at different times. Different ideas are popular, so it's hard to have direct comparisons. But the best we can do is just say that the general disposition, we're about average.
So there's another question here from Emma who asks, how can teachers respond to students who hold Holocaust denial beliefs?
Um, that's that's a good one. I don't know the answer to that. Um, I've had students, and I try to make my classroom as open to people saying whatever they want because that's what college is for. I've never had anyone say that they deny or doubt the Holocaust. I don't know how I would react to it. I would feel some bit of revulsion in the moment. But I would probably say something to the effect of that's, you know, we have mountains of evidence, and that's not a supported way to think about it.
Mhm.
Um, but there is no cure-all for people's beliefs. If there is no magic bullet you can give to somebody that's just going to change their mind about it. And unfortunately, a lot of the beliefs, particularly like Holocaust denial, a lot of the people that buy into those, have personality traits that make them impervious to persuasion. So, right. So the exact personality profile of people who buy into those sorts of conspiracy theories are the exact personality traits that make people unwilling to change their mind, and make them closed off to evidence and argumentation. Right. So I've done experiments. We can get beliefs to come down in the aggregate a little bit, but a lot of it's for people who aren't really bought in to certain ideas, and they don't care much about it. And often it's things that are sort of like JFK that doesn't really make a difference to people's lives. But once you get to hardcore believers like Holocaust deniers, it's if they're willing to say it in a classroom, I don't know exactly what you're going to do that's going to change their mind, unless they're kidding, in which case you tell them that's not something to kid about.
And it seems that conspiracy theories in general are just almost impossible to disprove because they just are circular reasoning. It's like your effort to disprove it only proves that it exists to the person who believes it.
Oh, for some people, yeah. I mean, there are people who might have heard something and they're like, oh, I heard this is true. And then you could say, no, that's not really true. Here's the evidence. And they'll change their mind. But it's again, they're not the believer you have to be worried about. The ones who are going to act on it, you're not going to change their mind with a fact check or a tweet or a correction or a debunk. Um, so and this is the thing. I study this, but if you look at how conspiracy theorists react to me, I mean, I'm often told that I'm in on it. I'm a deep state actor. I'm trying to stop them from finding the truth, right? So it only goes to figure, right? If I tell you that your conspiracy theory is wrong, well, of course I'm doing that because that's just what I want you to think.
So there, so kind of along these same lines, there's another question here from Carolyn who asks, are there specific triggers that move a person from belief to bad behavior?
Um, the one thing that I mean, let me preface this by saying that human behavior is really hard to predict. And a lot of the worst things we hear a lot about in the media, we hear about them in the media precisely because they're newsworthy, meaning they don't happen all the time, and they're sort of flashy events that aren't the norm, which makes them even harder to predict, right? So I don't have any magic formula that can say, oh yeah, tomorrow somebody's going to go and do something terrible because of a conspiracy theory. We're not that close to it yet, right? Like in that movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, we're not that good. Um, but what does concern me is when you have people with big audiences, political and media elites pushing conspiracy theories, to trusting audiences and getting people ginned up. over things that would concern them, right? Like, hey, are you a white person? Well, they're replacing the white people. Well, if you're somebody who's already bought into that and you're hearing about this on Fox News or from a member of Congress, that might be enough to trigger you and say, what I've thought all along is true, and I got to do something about it. Now's my time. And that's what bothers me, right? Because anyone could go put a stupid tweet or a Facebook post, and your average number of likes and tweets is, or likes and retweets or shares, whatever, is usually zero, right? Most of us could put something stupid online, no one's going to care. But when these people who have big audiences, like the politicians and the big name commentators on the cable channels, when they do this, they're reaching big audiences of lots of people and lots of followers. So that's what concerns me.
So, Joe, there's another question here from Nathan who says, there seems to be a lot of darkness in studying these kinds of beliefs. How does this line of work affect your own mental health and others in your field?
Um, I'm generally okay with it. I've been doing it so long that at this point nothing surprises me. Um, so where someone, someone who's not used to it might look at a poll and see, oh, 17% of people think that the Holocaust didn't happen and be horrified. To me, that's just another day at work. And I don't think it's good. I don't think it's okay. But it's where we have to start from. And I think a lot of people come at this with rosy hindsight. They say, oh, back in the past, we all had a shared reality and we all believed facts. No, that was never the case. It was never the case that we always believed facts. And it was never the case that we all had a shared reality. People have all sorts of wacky beliefs about all sorts of things. And in general, I think things are getting better. Maybe there's a blip right now for the next few years, but I generally think things are getting better on this score.
Hmm.
But it's just not the case that things have just blown up in the last 10 years and gotten much worse, and that we're in the season of conspiracy theories.
That's interesting. So your outlook is really like this is not as bad as it appears to be. Things are, as many people believe in conspiracy theories as have always believed in conspiracy theories, essentially. And kind of the media makes it sound a lot scarier than maybe it is.
Yeah, the good news is that the beliefs aren't getting more popular, right? So things aren't getting worse in that way. The bad news is that maybe things were this bad all along. We just didn't really, in some ways, we didn't notice, right? Like we
Mhm.
always had the headlines, like everyone's believing conspiracy theories, but I think, as a one thing that's happened in academia is we're paying a lot more attention to conspiracy theory beliefs, beliefs in wrong stuff, beliefs that are just plain wacky, like is the earth flat? And a lot of people seeing these polls and they're just being horrified by it. Like, oh my God, I can't believe this many people believe this. But I think in a lot of ways it was always there, sort of lurking around in one way or another. So
Hmm. So what, Joe, what should we take away from this conversation today?
well, everyone's a conspiracy theory believer. Like, when I've had polls where I poll on, 40, 50 conspiracy theories, and almost everyone will believe in one, if not a few. And that's sort of normal and it's okay. It's nothing to worry about. But there are people who believe in lots of conspiracy theories, and there are people who believe in ones that are what I might call antisocial, like Holocaust denial, things that are just not epistemically supported, and things that are often markers of dark personality traits and non-normative behavior patterns. Um, the good news is that the beliefs aren't becoming more popular. The bad news is that they're still there. They're hard to talk people out of, and For the last 8 years or so, we have a large portion of our political elites who are pushing these beliefs to massive audiences. And they're getting people ginned up and they're making people want to act in ways that have involved death threats, bomb threats, fire bombings, and murder. And that's bad. So um, we're looking for ways to deal with it. I don't know that there's going to be any silver bullet, but I do place a lot of blame with our political leaders who seem, many of whom, not all, but many of whom seem quite willing to use conspiracy theories for their advantage whenever it's convenient for them, and then we have to suffer the consequences.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing all this information and all your research with us over the decades of polling and work that you have done. It is so insightful. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Joe.
Well, thank you for having me.
I want to thank everybody for joining us in this program today. I know there were a number of questions about whether we would be sending out the slides. We're not going to be sending out the slides, but the program's recorded, and you will find the recording on our website by the end of the day tomorrow. So you can revisit any slides or information that you missed at that point. And our next Lunch and Learn program is going to be on Tuesday, April 8th, and will coincide with our exhibition of the Anne Frank exhibit. We will be hosting Doyle Stevick, who is the Dynamic Executive Director of the Anne Frank Center at the University of South Carolina and the Associate Professor of Leadership, Learning Design, and Inquiry. And he will be helping us to answer the question, does Anne Frank have a role to play in meeting the challenge of understanding the past in relationship to the present? So be sure to mark your calendars also for the exhibit Let Me Be Myself, The Life History of Anne Frank, which opens on April 3rd. And if you find our programming interesting and meaningful, please consider making a donation. Your donations make this programming and education possible. You can find a link on our website, of course. All of this work is possible because we have the most outstanding and dedicated team at the Holocaust Center. I want to give special thanks to Richard Green, who helps to run our Lunch and Learn programs. And thank you to our entire team, Jessica Michaels, Paul Regelbrug, Branda Anderson, Lori Werschel-Cohen, Lexi Jason, Charlotte Campbell, Lisa Spink, Michael Langberg, Liz Hall, Arlene Lugtu, Jess Alley, Mario Felipe Bamonte, Rosa Campos, and our newest member, Cheryl Harmon. Thank you also to the Conference on Material Claims Against Germany for their support of this program. And thank you to all of you for watching today and for your many comments and questions. We look forward to seeing you at our next Lunch and Learn program in April. This concludes our program for today.